Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to a table talk, a conversation on race. It's good to be with everybody on this beautiful Wednesday afternoon. Today is August 9th, 2023, but you may be listening to this at another time through our podcast or through our videos. And so we're very excited that you joined us for our conversation. My name is Erwin Lopez, and I'm the co-chair of the Beloved Community Leadership Team, which works alongside the Bishop's Anti-Racist Task Force. And we've been recording these podcasts for a little over a year. And our goal with these podcasts is to bring awareness to the anti-racism work in the Florida Conference, to equip you, especially as you're integrating anti-racism into your lives and into your ministries. And most importantly, we do this work because we believe this is an act of discipleship. This is how we love God and we love neighbor. So today we're going to be having a conversation with David Williamson, Pastor David Williamson. He is the co-chair of the Public Policy and Witness Team for our conference. And he's also the co-lead pastor at Grace United Methodist Church in St. Augustine, Florida. And today we're going to have a conversation with him, and he's going to update us on the work of the public policy team. And so, David, thank you so much for your time. And so tell us what's been going on in the conference work, and we're excited to hear about it. The floor is yours.
Thanks, everyone. Grateful to be here together with you and all the folks listening in. The Florida Conference Public Policy and Witness Anti-Racism Team. It's a mouthful, and the heartbeat of that work is really to recognize the ways in which racism shows up and functions through public policies, and the ways in which that has happened historically and the way that continues to happen. Oftentimes, without using, these days anyway, like overtly racist language. It's kind of seems subtle in the way that the impact of these policies take place. So over the last 2-3 years in Florida, we've just been paying attention to different policies that have a negative impact, particularly on communities of color and on the work of anti-racism. And this last, actually a year ago, the session passed a policy called On Individual Freedom. There's one name for it. Some people call it the anti-woke law. And this particular policy, in the name of individual freedom, limits the freedom of business owners and educators and what they can teach around racism and around the way that racism functions in our businesses and amongst our employees and in our life. And so we really wanted to educate people about what this policy said, and so that people can make decisions for themselves about how they might respond. And so we hosted some different community gatherings virtually for people to learn about the content of that policy, and taught people how they can make contact with their elected leaders and to have find their own voice in the ways that they would be able to respond to that policy and let their lawmakers know their opinion on that. So that's kind of the general overview of what we're doing, looking at how racism functions in the institutional level, which does not, of course, discount the way in which racism functions in our personal thinking and attitudes and beliefs, or our interactions with other people interpersonally, or even how it functions in our culture in general. Just recognizing that racism functions in so many different levels, but this particular or group, the Public Policy and Witness Team, really focuses on that institutional and policy making level.
Great. So most of your work has been to create community conversations virtually to educate people on the anti-woke law, the Individual Freedom Act, correct?
Right. That was in 2021. There's another policy this past session in 2022 that was focused on state university systems and what state universities could require or not require in terms of their hiring of employees as it relates to diversity, equity, and inclusion work. And so that particular bill is, it was Senate Bill 266, and it was passed and signed into law, and is also being challenged in the courts as well, because of the way in which it limits the voices of people whose livelihood was connected to teaching diversity, equity, and inclusion in state university systems. So there's some challenges around it, and at the same time, we still wanted people to know what that policy said and what its impact would be. And essentially, what it does is it defines diversity, equity, and inclusion work as a left-wing political indoctrination and agenda, which is pretty strong language that I, of course, disagree with, because, you know, honestly, Erwin, the analogy I use is thinking about the church and recognizing the way in which the church has historically gotten it wrong at times and needed reformation and correction about how we go about our work of making disciples. And there's been seasons of life historically in the church where the church was oppressive and exclusive of women and of people of color, supported slavery. And we recognized that for what it is and repented of it and turned a new direction. What we did not do is say the church needs to be canceled. It needs to be banned, as it were. So while I have no doubt that there are versions of diversity, equity, and inclusion teaching that may even overtly try to recruit people for left-wing political agendas, I want to say that that is certainly not true of all DEI work. And to cancel DEI work entirely or to throw it out entirely, to me, is a very sad thing and not helpful for our society. It's not helpful for particularly people who love Jesus and want to follow him and build community across cultural differences, which I believe Jesus came to show us how to do. So for us as followers of Jesus, I think it's really concerning that there would be laws that would ban the opportunity to have education about building inclusive community, diversity, equity, and inclusion, just by simply naming it as all one-sided left-wing political agenda. I would disagree with that. So we just try to help people understand what's going on, with what the legislator's doing, and to equip them to speak up and make their opinions known to their elected leaders. And again, like you said earlier on, this is a way that we love Jesus. Sometimes there's criticism that, well, the church is getting too involved in politics. And what I say to that is that politics is just one realm in which we either love our neighbor or do harm to our neighbor. Policies actually make a difference in how people access goods and services and opportunity. And when policies limit goods access and opportunity to certain groups of people, followers of Jesus should be concerned, because that's the way we're actually not loving our neighbor well through public policy. So it's not about trying to recruit people to a certain political party. The Public Policy and Witness Team is not advocating for the Republican Party or the Democratic Party in any way. We are simply paying attention to how public policies impact communities of color, especially. And when we see a negative impact, we have to raise our voice about that.
I love all that you shared, David. Thank you so much. I want to ask you a question. What is your wish list in terms of a leader, a pastor of a church? If you if you could get every congregation member to blank, almost like a step by step, like first thing you want them to do is attend one of these educational informational service sessions. The second thing you want them to do is X, Y, Z. So what is your wish list? What do you wish every single person in your church was doing to be active in this policy work?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, I'm kind of biased in that the approach that I use is one that teaches a certain framework that helps me to be open to cultural differences of all kinds and to make contact with difference, um, and to have the capacity to hold contact with difference when I'm feeling afraid or when I'm getting angry, is those emotional experiences sometimes hijack the process. I find that people withdraw or distance themselves from the work of building beloved community because of such emotional, intense emotional feelings. So what I would say is, think about what it is that your next step is in the work. Some people are just starting out. Some people are been in it a long time. They're exhausted. They're tired. They need to figure out a way to stay engaged, to care for themselves, and find community that can help you do that. This is one of the reasons why I'm committed to hosting. You know, you're hosting these great table talks on Wednesdays. I'm committed to hosting what we call community conversation on Tuesdays at noon, and then another group similar to that, but a little bit different on Wednesdays at 5, called Building Beloved Community. And basically what those groups do is it's almost like a support group for people that really want to do the work of building beloved community as an act of discipleship, and they want tools to help them do that, to find their voice in that work, to build capacity and strength in that work, and to really be a part of the good work that Jesus wants to do to transform the world, to help us all do the work of peace with justice. So in those sessions that when we meet, it's virtually and in person, and we provide education, again, about some tool or aspect of how oppression and change functions, and give people a chance to try those things on and practice them together, and then celebrate successes, little, large ones and small ones, and victories along the way, which we need to stay engaged in the work, because this is hard work. I mean, this one of the practices we do, we call it check-in, and it's a chance for us to show up in the space to share what it is that's going on inside of us right now. You might even think about that for yourself as you're listening to this. What is going on inside of you right now? Are you holding a lot of sadness? Are you holding anxiety? Are you feeling some just anger at a boundary that's been crossed or injustice that has been done? And my question to you is, where do you go with that emotional information? How do you care for yourself when you're feeling those feelings? Because again, what I find happens is, in the midst of those intense feelings, if we don't have an outlet to share them and move through them and to get what we need in the midst of them, then it's where burnout happens. It's where people give up. It's where we harm ourselves and other people. So these contexts of Tuesdays and Wednesday nights is a bit of a support group, quite frankly, for people who want to do this work in an ongoing way. So yeah, that's what I would say. Just care for yourself in the work. Find a group where you can take your next step. That would be my first advice.
I think that's great advice. You know, one of the things that I've been a part of, I've been part of this triad of people through this racial trauma cohort. And finding that community is so important, because this work is very isolating. And honestly, you feel like you're the only one doing this work. And you look around and you see things from a different perspective, and you're wondering, does anybody else see what I see? And what I found in these groups is that it's a safe space where it's more normalized in these spaces than they are in other spaces. So I feel a little more normal, you know. So yeah, find a community, take your next step, take care of yourself. I love that advice. Um, let's talk a little bit about a little bit more about the policy work. And I'm just wondering if you can briefly summarize some of the discussions you've been having in these information sessions on the anti-woke law, maybe some misconceptions,
Yeah.
and just maybe a little summary of the law and why it's important for us to be involved.
Right. Yeah. So the law that was passed called the anti-woke law, it was House Bill 7. And it's also called the Individual Freedom Act. And it was an addition to, it amends the Florida Civil Rights Act statute. And it says, and I have it right in front of me here, at least the core of it, says it consists of 8 concepts that cannot be incorporated into any mandatory instruction. So for an employer or for a school, public school institution, they cannot make any of these things mandatory instruction. And the first one says, you cannot teach that members of one race, color, national origin, or sex are morally superior to members of another race, color, national origin, or sex. And for that one, we're like, yeah, that's right. There is no better than, less than dynamic based on race. The second one is a person by virtue of his or her race, color, national origin, or sex is inherently racist, sexist, or oppressive, whether consciously or unconsciously, and you cannot teach that. And so what that's getting at is the criticism of some DEI work that would say, because I'm white, because I'm a man, I am going to be inherently racist and sexist, and that's just who I am because I'm white and I'm a man. And so what I would say to that is that I'm not inherently racist or sexist. I am a culturally formed being. I am a socialized person. I learn consciously and unconsciously what it means to live in this body that I inhabit in the world, and to ignore that reality of being a culturally formed person or a socialized person, and to ignore the way in which whiteness and maleness, in this case, have historically, statistically, been reasons for me to have access and opportunity that someone who would be a Black woman, for example, in our society is different. It's just different. And so the invitation that I give people is pay attention to the difference of people's experience who are culturally different from yourself, without a sense of attack, shame, or blame, right? Because there's another bullet in this policy that speaks to, that let's see, I don't know which one it is here. Yes, the second to last bullet. So bullet number 7 in the policy says, you can't teach that a person by virtue of his or her race, color, sex, or national origin bears personal responsibility for and must feel guilt, anguish, or other forms of psychological distress because of actions in which a person played no part committed in the past by other members of the same race, color, national origin, or sex. So this is basically saying that you can't teach someone like me who's white and male that I need to feel bad for the history of how white men have created policies that have excluded Black people in our country. And while I don't think the goal of anti-racism education is to make people feel psychological distress or guilt or anguish, I certainly don't want to say that the work is easy, right? For me, learning this history has been painful, and embarrassing in some cases, because I'm learning more about what my ancestors did and family members of mine that I'm not proud of, right? And what I'm doing in my own journey is not canceling them out or calling them evil or dehumanizing them for what they did. I'm simply at this point disagreeing with what they did, while remaining a part of that same family tree, right? Like it's recognizing a lot, in a lot of ways, who our ancestors were biblically. I mean, if you read the Bible, you're going to see things that you're not going to be proud of, as far in terms of how you belong to the people of God. And it doesn't mean we just cancel our relationship with them. To me, it really means that I recognize my humanity in this case, and I say, okay, God, so what can I do better moving forward? How can I do better working for peace with justice to build beloved community? And I look at that place of, be it regret or guilt or shame or whatever it might be that I might experience, as a generative and holy space. So I invite people to think of discomfort in this work as a space where God is very present, doing God's work in us. And so for a policy to make it illegal for people to abide in those places where they might feel some psychological distress or discomfort or anguish, I don't think that's helpful. I look at it almost like you now have legal backing to avoid the good work of healing that is so needed in our personal lives and in our communities. So it's one of the things that makes me so sad about this particular policy. Um, so those are two examples that come from that particular policy.
That's
Erwin, I
great.
don't
That's
want
great.
to take a lot of time here on going through all of them, but yeah.
No, that's great. Give us a little snippet of kind of what you do in these sessions. You go through some line by line and discuss them and get people educated on it. That's great. A couple more questions for you, David. One of them is, oh, because I was thinking, besides getting involved in some of the policy work, are there other ways that churches can, I would say, educate people? For example, I'm thinking during summer, we hosted a racial trauma retreat, and we were reading Grandmother's Hands, which is a book by Resma Manikin talking about racialized trauma. And there wasn't a great attendance. I think we had 2 students who were coming. And so I'm thinking, should I have changed the perspective and maybe led a class on the theology of Martin Luther King, something that's more accessible for somebody who's listening to the language that we use that's been politicized and they're less likely to go. Are there ways that we can write our governors, but also get the church involved in leading book studies or having conversations or being involved in these beloved community works? Have we thought about that? Things that we can do beyond inspired by the policy work, but beyond the policy work.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I love that. Reading a book like My Grandmother's Hands, we we did a book study on Howard Thurman's book Jesus and the Disinherited, which is an excellent way to recognize how the church has treated Jesus differently, depending on the church that you've been in. And sometimes the church has used Jesus as justification to hold on to power over other people, and Jesus has been understood and embraced very differently by people without that kind of power, and how Jesus is there to bring liberation. So anyway, the book studies like that are excellent ways to invite people in and get people engaged. And I would say, whether it be you got 2 people coming or whether you got 5 or 15 people coming, just start with where you are. Um, start with where you are.
Well, I think you've given us a great update on the policy work, on the work of the team. I hope that people get engaged. And one question for you, David. I have a couple more questions for you. But one of them is, how do they get in contact with you? Is there space for people to join the public policy and witness team? Um, if somebody's listening to this and says, okay, I need to call David, I need to get involved, how do they do that?
Yes, so you can reach me at david@grace-st-augustine.org. And it's Grace St. Augustine, it's ST, no period, augustine.org, grace-st-augustine.org. So that's my email address. If you want to call me, I'd be glad to call or text me, 407-415-7850. And I'd be glad to have you come and sit in on a policy and witness team meeting. If you want to be a part of the one in your district, because every district is also tasked with having a public policy and witness team. Be glad to support you there and collaborate with you on the work you're doing in your district. If you are looking for a support group for this work in an ongoing way, we'd love for you to come on Tuesdays. I'll send you the Zoom link. I send out an email prompt every Monday that has the information we're going to address on Tuesdays. Yeah, and any way I can support you, that's what I would love to do.
Great. David is here as a resource, and make sure you reach out to him if you have any questions and if you want to get involved, because this kind of leads me to my final question, and it's a question, David, about observations. As you've been doing this work for how many years now have you been involved in this work?
Really intentionally, I'd say 5 years.
Okay, about 5 years. What are your observations in terms of engagement? Almost just asking the simple question, how's it going? Um, what kind of people are involved in this work? Do we have a strong Florida United Methodist presence involved in this work? What does Generation Z look like? Are they involved in this work? So if you take some time to reflect and observe, can you share with some findings in terms of the engagement?
Yeah, I've found that there's moments where, due to circumstances in life, their pain level increases and they want to do this more. And at other times when, like I mentioned earlier, the emotional gravity of the work sometimes has caused people to pull back. And I mean, I feel that in my own being as well. So I have to think about what approach can I use to stay engaged for the long term. And uh, I know I cannot be super intense all the time. There have been times when the work has been super intense, and there needs to be times where we incorporate rest into the work as well for ourselves. And so I've noticed that rhythm has been important to pay attention to. As far as age groups of people, I've seen really a lot of different age groups. We recently we held a 4-day training event that had high school students, college students, people in their 20s, and pretty much every generation was represented in that room. And so I find that people of all generations are interested in how to build beloved community and do the work of anti-racism at the 4 levels. And as far as connecting with people about the work, if you're looking at how do I get started or how do I build on what I'm doing, I would say start with yourself. Like, commit yourself to doing this work, educating yourself. And as you work on you, you become somebody who influences others. That's been my experience. And you know, you show up in places where there's you know, maybe if you're a white person like me, then go visit your local AME church, you know, go to worship there. Ask the pastor if you can go to lunch with them and just build a relationship. And it's long term. It's not a one and done thing, you know. There's no one silver bullet on this. This is long-term work, generationally long work, right? We receive the baton from generations before us. We will pass it to generations after us. So I just think of it that way. Yeah, those are things that come to my mind, Erwin.
No, that's good. That's great. I have so many more questions, but I think this is a good time to end. And hopefully we can have another conversation in a month or so and continue to update the conference and update the listeners to the work of the public policy team. And thank you, David, for your time. If there's any way we can support you, anything more that you need from the people listening to this, please let us know. And we'll be sure to share your contact information with everybody. And you have anything, last words you want to share?
God bless you guys. I send prayers of blessing upon you. You are doing holy work, and it is work that Jesus is very present in the midst of. So you are not alone in it, and you have power greater than your own in the midst of the work, no matter how you're feeling today. So God bless you. God strengthen you.